Hello, hello, internets! This is going to be the second of the Trifusion videos, which is going to be a combination of Ostrava, Solaire, and Lucatil. The first video in the series was, of course, Lucatil and Solaire. This is going to be Ostrava plus Solaire. So, let's get right into it, shall we? Alright, here we go! First things first. We're going to do the same thing that we did last time with the other video. We're going to go back through and do a little bitty preliminary thumbnail, whatchamacallit. That way we can get all the basic core ideas of what exactly it is that we're going to be doing with the design itself. In this case, we're going to do the little bitty thumbnail things. Some basic ideas with Ostrava. Let's see. He is, of course, a little bit asymmetrical. Everything is symmetrical aside from his one arm over to the side. He has a sort of almost a pauldron on his shield arm, and he is using a spalder, using his, what a noobish mistake on my part, a spalder on the other side of his arm. But you can see the designs are sort of similar in a way. And they're similar in the respect that they're both sort of realistic designs. They are functional. Unlike a lot of Dark Souls 2 designs, which are kind of more high fantasy designs, with these two guys, especially Demon Souls, they're much more grounded in actual medieval designs. As far as uniting these two designs, as you can see that I'm doing here, I'm going back over both of these thumbnails and just looking at what similarities that both of them have as far as the sort of core designs go, and then just piling them both on top of one another. Things like the greaves down here are kind of a problem because they're almost the same exact thing, except for some very minor differences in curvature and things like that. So, with things like that, I kind of end up, it kind of ends up becoming a bit of a problem later on. And see, we now have our sort of finalized idea. This is our very, very rough idea that we're going to be working with to try to create something in the future. You could see me doing sort of a little tabard thing over to the side. I was running with that, well, sort of like the Throne Defender armor. But I realized, no, I'm cheating a bit too much in that respect, so let's just go with it here. Okay, pose. Unlike last time, this time I'm going to try to come up with something that realizes their character a bit more. But like I said last time, this is fairly limited because you can't just show the biggest action pose because this is a design that's supposed to show off all the minor details. So you have to do something that's going to show off every aspect of their body except for, of course, the back. I mean, you can't show everything. It can't be like a comic book pose where, you know, Spider-Woman or whoever is... You know, you can see their boobs sticking out to one side and their ass is like over their head and, you know, just, oh, check out everything, every last detail of their body. Oh, yeah, this fucking stuff. Can't do that. And I'm trying here to try to cheat my way into it by thinking, well, maybe I can get away with a pose that is showing off everything, but is still a straight-up pose and not just a guy standing there. But I quickly realized, you know, even with that, I'm still obscuring way too much information. And every single time I'm saying, well, next time I'll get it. But I'm kind of slowly learning that there's no possible way. They're all going to end up looking sort of the same. And the biggest, yeah, you can't see shit. I finished that one little design, and I thought, well, maybe a perspective image will give me a chance to cheat. But you just can't see anything. So ultimately, I end up going with the same sort of idea. I come up with a basic sort of standing here sort of pose, and I try to incorporate as much personality into it as I possibly can. And as you can see, I've probably gone through about more than 10 at least different poses by now. I haven't been keeping track, but it's one of those. I know a lot of you guys watch the videos and get irritated with me getting rid of information over and over again. But that's just how you design. You know, you can't commit to any one thing. If you do try to commit to one thing and say, alright, this is good enough, then you're not going to have any luck. You're going to end up coming across some sort of hurdle. Whereas if you had not committed to anything and decided, yeah, let's just keep changing things until we come up with more and more ideas, then, yeah, you would have been more successful. And I think this is the basis of what I end up doing with the... I think this is the sort of final realizing. This is one of those things where the primary looks a little bit better. Because once I start adding on armor and things like that, then the sort of basic form starts getting a little bit too obscure. Not obscure as in, obscure in the sense that too much is being obscured, visually obscured. But this is what I end up using as a finalized sort of template. And of course here I'm just going back over it, over and over and over again. Again, don't commit to anything. The whole idea is that you're kind of creating a skeleton, and then you're just erasing what you don't need, adding back what you thought you might have needed, and you just keep going with it until you come up with something that actually works. And with this one, I'll go ahead and tell you now that I am fairly pleased with how it ends up turning out. Although, again, it's one of those things where I feel like I'm never going to be happy. Even working with this one, where I was trying my best to learn from the mistakes of the prior video, which you guys might not think there were any mistakes, but I certainly do, because I'm an asshole like that. I was, even then, the whole time, just completely unhappy with how certain things were coming out until I actually completed them. At which point, I had to sit back and go, it looks okay, looks okay. Here I am... I kind of did two designs that were so similar to one another, I decided I like some elements of it, but I also like some elements of the other one. So what I'm doing is just going back over both of them at the same time, and coming up with a more realized primary sketch. This is probably something a lot of people don't have the patience to do, though, because even this right here is taking probably... I don't know, the whole primary stage from start to finish probably took about 3 or 4 hours, if I had to guess. Not in terms of just drawing, but even things like picking up reference materials and stopping and going back to it later and thinking, how could I improve on this? And, the drawing itself, of course. Just a big pain in the ass. Like a big old Sal. Doesn't want to move, but, you gotta get her into the pen, but she doesn't want to do jack shit because she recently had piglets and, that's just how they are, those fucking pigs. You guys have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. Anyways, at this point, this is not actually the final line drawing that I'm starting here. Or I think that is. I'm starting on this thing, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'll just pump this out real fast. And I keep doing this, and I'm thinking, oh god, this is awful. Because my spatial reasoning with his mask, sort of, I'm calling it a mask, it's not really a mask, it's I guess it's just called a visor, but, I keep fucking it up, because one of the problems here that I'm already running into, and I probably should have started with the body before I started with the face, started with the hardest possible thing first, is that Solaire has a more flat face. His helmet is pretty straight up and down, whereas Ostrava's obviously very, very pointy, very beakish. Here I'm going through, and I'm basically teaching myself how to draw this thing. I'm tracing it, and this is something useful that you can do. If you're trying to emulate something, draw it. Just go back over it, and even if you're not using it for the same pose or anything, I mean, I'm not telling you to trace. But just draw it, that way you get an idea of, oh, this is what the stroke is like, or this is how the metal bends in this way. That way, whenever you start doing it again, you can actually remember it. For this design, for what I'm doing here, it actually would have worked better if it was a side profile. But, you can't have everything. You can't have Spider-Woman's ass sticking out over her head. Or can you? No, you can't. But with this one, it actually looks... I will tell you guys now, I love scratchy line work. I absolutely fucking love it. Like, if I could do that with every single... Maybe if I could do it with my next video. But I've already done the other ones this way, so I'll have to do them this way. But I am absolutely in love with scratchy artwork. I love doing things like that. Because to me, it looks better than actual, solid, finished, fully realized artwork. solid line work, I should say. There's just something about it. I think it's the fact that because it is so scratchy, it leaves more up to the person looking at the thing. It leaves it more up to the imagination. And you don't, like, if you're doing this, and it's very focused line work, then you can't really make many mistakes. Whereas if you're doing a lot of scratchiness, then you're kind of insinuating shadows and you're insinuating form, and it's left completely up to the viewer exactly what it is that they're looking at. I mean, you obviously still have to commit to design choices and kind of realize the full image, but it gives a lot more leadway. For like, it's the difference between painting with very loose strokes versus painting with very hard, definite forms, if that makes any sense. Finishing up my comb here. I really like the comb. I like that comb. But that's the difference. Oh, something I'll mention. Ostrava has fluted armor, which is, you see those little ridges and everything, kind of where the metal is raised. That's fluted armor. It's... I want to say it doesn't really have much of a practical purpose, but it is super fucking fancy. So it was pretty common for... It was sort of a fashion statement sort of thing. But it probably also did have a more of a functional reason for why they did it. Although I don't know off the top of my head why they did it. But that's what they did. But anyways, his armor was fluted. Solaire's was not fluted. Solaire is just a big dumb glute as far as his design goes. He has a big breastplate. He has grass on his shoulders. He has kind of a shitty toilet paper butt with his raggedy old tabard hanging down around there. And that's it. He's just a simple guy out to find his own son. So trying to combine those two things was kind of awkward. Trying to make chainmail lines right there, making them wobbly enough to insinuate that there's links going on there. I don't think I keep these lines. I'm setting them to their own layer, I think. Or did I? Actually, I think I made the mistake of, yep, there I go. Got rid of them. I should have kept them to their own layer, that way I could have quickly deleted it. But there I'm trying to figure out, how the hell do I do chainmail? Because I don't do textures particularly well. And later on we'll see we'll see what happens with that, won't we? Won't we, future Eli? Actually, I am what the hell am I? I am future Eli. No, I'm future of the future Eli. Because I'm going to have to stop. Which means that I'll have to take it away me in the future of the future where maybe the ants have already won? I don't know. What the hell am I talking about? Anyways. I lost myself in my train of non-thought. But anyways, combining those two things is not particularly fun. Because they're two completely different minor aesthetic choices. Like, the fluted armor is a minor detail. And, Solaire's design doesn't really have any minor details. So it's pretty easy for things like that to completely overpower the combined fusion design. And I think I mentioned this in my little middle part, but I did this to try to combine the idea of Solaire's little tabard that goes over his armor with the idea of Ostrava, who doesn't have anything like that at all. It's kind of an Alva armor look from Dark Souls 2, which I consider to be the best looking armor overall. I mean, I don't know if it's my favorite armor, but probably the most solid looking design in terms of balance. Look, just a really good looking armor, especially with that red. Really awesome looking armor. And unfortunately, it's kind of so common that it's kind of unpopular for being popular, if that makes sense. But as you can probably see with the breastplate, I'm trying to combine the idea that it might be somewhat fluted, making it sort of more ridge-like, which actually is not a very good design choice in terms of its engineering. Usually if you're fluting like a chest armor, usually it's fluted down like the sides or near the armpits, or where there's going to be some natural seams anyways. Because the fluting process is actually going to raise parts of the armor and probably going to give it a natural spine that, sort of similar to the comb on the helmet, is going to give it a little bit more of a natural resiliency. But if you start doing it all over the place, I kind of imagine that's going to be a disservice. By the way, here, I was not flipping my canvas, so the bottom half was kind of tilted to one side. That's what I ended up fixing. Since I'm not using an LCD, tablet, I can't really... I have to rely on the monitor, which kind of fucks me over. Here I noticed, in the primary, you can see that I was trying to add a spalder over to the side, but I realized that, especially with that plus Solaire, that maybe it was a better idea to just roll with the idea that that whole weapon arm is absolutely nothing but just the chainmail. Because... try to explain this. Because a lot of armor designs, the reason why that they were asymmetrical, on the arms at least, is because one arm, of course, is used for defending, and the other arm is used for attacking. So your arm that you use for attacking is going to need to be as limber as possible, which means it's probably going to have sort of light armor. Whereas the other one, which is going to be used for defense, raising your shield and whatnot, or just generally, leaning in for, sort of a, takedown maneuvers or whatever have you, then it's going to be more heavily armored. Which, of course, some people, during fighting, they would take advantage of that and say, ride the sword up the other guy's sword into their weapon arm. And since it had less armor on it, then maybe it was easier to get a glancing blow that would cause enough of a minor hit that would allow them to either get them down to the ground or continue riding that weapon up into their visor or up into their gorget or something like that. In any case, I'll say this, the objective... Actually, no, I'll save that for later, fuck me. But anyways, the basic point that I was trying to make is that it's good to have common sense on your side when designing these things. That way, it actually looks functional. So just kind of research your shit before you get your shit together. That way, all of your shit is completely united, and you can all take a big shit together. But anyways, let's take it back to the past, and I'll allow past Eli to take it from here. Assuming that this recorded properly. I'll see you in the future of my own future. Hello everyone, it is me from both the future and the past, in a way. A few things to explain before I begin. It's not working? Oh, line works, locked, that's weird. First thing is that this is the first time that I've recorded anything on this new PC. This is the brand new PC, everything should be a bit smoother as far as the video goes. You can see everything, like on the old one, the frame rate was just absolutely abysmal. Also, as far as the audio goes, what I used to do is, I'll explain this in the best way I can, is the old waveform, I tried to have the gain and the microphone gain up as much as possible that I could actually see the waveform like going up as I speak. It looked something like that, and there would be the upper and lower bands of the decibels. But the thing is, that would create a lot of interference for some reason. So what I'm trying on this new PC, and I'm assuming that there's slightly less interference, although I tested it before and it was almost just as bad, is this time around I'm testing it with the gain as low as possible, so it actually looks like a straight line most of the time, and every so often I'll see little bitty things like this popping up, and that's my gain. And what I'm doing is, this time around I am amplifying all this back up so that it kind of looks normal. And so far, in tests at least, that has looked somewhat okay. So, the audio now should either be exactly the same, I don't know, or it should be a little bit better, or a little bit worse. I have no idea. I guess we'll just see, won't we? And I think that's it as far as the things that I actually wanted to mention. Other than, this is all the other footage that I recorded on was 2 frames per second. Stuff that I was doing on the old PC. So, that's all sped up, of course, so you can't really notice it. Okay, but here's what I'm going to do on this one. This one, on the live commentary, I'm bowing my head and thinking intensely right now, is I want to show you not how to, but I guess I'll just show this. The color zone phase of my drawing. Let's turn on resources here, and look at Ostrava and Solaire. what we are going to try to do is, first off, figure out where our zones are. And I mean, what materials that we're going to have to color in and what colors they're going to be. For example, it's line work. Okay, let's just do, yeah, sort of that color. Okay, metal, probably another kind of metal, but this will probably be like a slightly different shade of, brightness. Here's some metal up here, and, feather is up here. That'll probably be to its own layer. Here's our grass. I still have no idea what the hell that is. And, let's see. These are our little body harness things, or what are they? Lanes. They're called lanes, I think. Actually, this isn't a lane. This is probably more of a lane. Actually, that is called a, what is that? This is a gorget, actually. This sort of segment, this sort of, a blade of armor sort of thing going on around the neck, that's called the gorget. Actually, this is also called a comb, and that's to make the helmet a little bit more solid as far as its design. It's the spine of the helmet. That's the reason why those things exist, if you've ever wondered. And I'm just rambling off native bullshit. What the fuck am I talking about? And, anyways, here's some more metal as I lose my train of thought. Sort of, even though this is a solid, like, it doesn't have like a placard area, and it doesn't have a fold or anything like that. It's just a solid breastplate. And here's sort of this might be leather. Also, on Ostrava, this is a bit more leathery, whereas on Solaire, this is more cloth, but let's just go ahead and label that as being leather. And this will probably, let's actually cloth and cloth, because this will be closer to leather, these sort of belt area. And this is also going to be metal, a smaller area of metal. More metal, probably these two things, also metal, Just finding little bitty things like that throughout the drawing. These sort of in-sewn little bitty metal segments that are going to be found in the cloth are probably also going to be metal. I think actually how they did this is they would have tinier metal plates that would be fitted within the cloth that actually lay under this fabric. It protected you a little bit from thrusting attacks. Like, it would have to go through that, plus the metal, plus whatever chainmail happens to be lying under it. What this area, what the crotchal region is, I have no idea. This could be leather, or either way, Ostrava has, this is a darker area. Like, these are sort of chaps, in a way, that he's wearing. Whereas this, I guess, is the actual fabric that he has under it. Whether this is chainmail or not, I can't really tell on him. This is going to be... Actually, what was that? Cloth. This will probably be a slightly different color, but I'll label it that way anyways. This is... On Solaire, this was part of the tabard. But on this, it's kind of forming a... It's forming what the Tesset on Ostrava used to be. But I'll just go ahead and label as a tabard area. And I cheated. On this, I had hold on, pull up my resources. If you look on his, obviously this goes all the way down, but he also still has it coming. I don't have a, where the hell is it? Front and back. For the Lord's sake. Okay, there we go. But he has it up front. That is part of that I'm carrying over to try them. It's one of the Solaire components that I'm carrying over. The reason why I put this up here is because I wanted it to be clear that this is coming under his breastplate and coming back up. Otherwise, if this was just solid metal all the way through, and this just suddenly appeared, that would look a little bit unnatural. I like doing that in designs. Having elements peek out in places. That way it's clear that it is a functional, working piece of whatever it happens to be. The less brutal transitions between one color, one shape, one element of the design to another, the better you're going to have. The easier time you're going to have. The polyon down here is going to be metal as well. I might have this be slightly different color. I'm not sure yet. I think I forgot to, did he have fan plates on the back of his... No, where's my... Ostrava, do you have fan plates? No, you do not. Okay, he doesn't have fan plates, so I don't have to worry about that. He also doesn't have... Okay, I'm not going to start rambling about that. But the greaves down here are going to be metal as well. And the sabaton down here is probably also going to be metal. And I'm probably going to keep this as just being... What's that? Do I have an S? No, I don't have an S. Probably just straight up skin. I'm going to keep this being skin because on Solaire he has bare fists. Even though I really don't like that, but... Right now I think that this design is a bit more Ostrava-y for the most part. So I'm trying to carry over a little bit more smaller elements from Solaire to unify the two designs. And I think the hands are a small little consolation in that effect. Because a lot of the things that I'm taking from Solaire are things that Ostrava has already. Like the belt, he already has a belt. Like the chainmail, I already have that going down there. Plus their grease and polyon kind of look exactly the same, and so on. They're very similar designs in some respects, because they're both designs that are based on real-life armors. And because they're based on real-life armors, they're going to have similar functionality. And because they're both functional, which I really appreciate, because they're both functional, they're going to have very, very similar overall designs. But anyways, we have marked out the territory of all the base layers that we're going to have. So we would have our middle layer, and we would have, like the feather, if I can type fast enough. By the way, this is a new keyboard. It makes those pleasant little old typewriter noises, but it's not too loud. This is a, what is it? It's an MX Brown, that's what it is. Quote-unquote grass, why not? And... skin, and there's probably a few more of these things that I'm going to be forgetting, but you get the idea. I'm not going to type all of them out, but we keep all of these to their own layers, and we contain them all within a color folder. And you can do this many different ways. You can situate all the, like, you don't even need to use this. You can do this, don't take my word for it, kids. Reading Rainbow. But this is just how I do it. I will take all of my color areas, chuck them into the same color folder, and this is our sample area, don't need that. Yeah, whatever. And I will put my line on top of it. You can also put this under this, and then change this to multiply. I guess that's one way of doing it. Personally, I don't like the look of it, but you can do that if you want to. And you can also set this to multiply as well. Eventually I will, but for the time being, that kind of conflicts with whenever you're doing your coloring, it can kind of seep through and make you mess up. So usually I keep, let's actually go ahead and double this. Triple it, why not? Make this a little bit darker. That way, where's my sample? That way, everything is very obvious as far as where everything goes. Actually, let's not double that, because it's going to mess up some of the, let's see, just one. Okay, good. Let's keep that to its own layer. Because if we start combining too many of them, it'll lose some of the minor opacity in between the strokes. And I want to keep those, because if I did away with them, then the edges would all be too hard, if that makes any sense. Okay, but this is the basic idea that we're going to be running with. And the reason why you contain all these to their own folder, I'll give you an example, is say we painted, here's our metal over here that we did, and then we also did, our feather up here. But you'll notice that, since we don't have any of these set to multiply, like so, then one of these is going to obscure the other, whichever is on top. This is how layers work, of course. Anyone that has used Photoshop or whatever knows this. And, you can rearrange them as you see fit and so on. But all of that information is going to remain within this folder. And if we did something completely different below it, outside of this folder, then it wouldn't show up under anything that's contained within the folder itself, unless we set the folder to, multiply or pass through or so on, or sorry, multiply, or yeah, that's right. Okay, normal's correct. Okay, but that's the reason why you do it that way, because then you can, if you need to move anything, then you can just move the whole folder. Like everything is contained within that one folder, and it makes it much easier to contain everything. And even once you're done, we could say, this is all his stuff, and then we could move all of his folders and all of his line work, and then everything would move. This makes it so much easier. Just cleaning things up, keeping things labeled goes a long way. Okay, anyways. The rest of this is stuff that's really not going to be overly important. Did I do this? Okay, don't need that. Okay. There's a couple of things that I did want to show you. This is probably all just basic stuff. But anytime that you have... Because all of your line strokes are not always going to be solid edges like this. Sometimes they're going to need to be like this down here. Look, hold on. I'll do this. Actually, I'll do this over here. Like if I wand off this... That's not right. Here. Okay. If I wand off this, you notice there's a lot of little itty-bitty spaces that are just, it's doing that because there's small little variations of the line strokes. Like there's small differences in opacity that's causing it to not select correctly. Whereas if I select, up here, it goes all the way out beyond the border. Whereas, say, if I selected, like this, then I would just need to, select in this area and then it would be fixed. That's because all of the lines of this are much more rigid and there's no fade on the borders, so it makes it very easy to select them. So whenever you're doing something like this, you can either do it two ways. You can either draw it as it, you can either draw it like this with these hard edges and then just get rid of the lines entirely once you're done. Or you can do what I'm doing here and just go along the edges and just basically do what you would have done to begin with the other sections. That way, let's say that I got all the way around. I'm not going to show this whole thing. Let's just say I went all the way around. Then I come back up and I unite the whole thing, and then I can just go to my bucket and fill it back in. Or alternatively, you can wand this area, expand you can increment the selection of that area, and that should overlap enough that you don't get as many seams like I'm getting here on the edges. And then you just go back through on the edges and fill everything back in. And that's the easiest way to do that. Okay. But I guess that's all I really wanted to show you guys. I wanted to keep this as brief as possible because I'm not even really certain that the audio is going to be recording correctly. And I'm doing a slightly different way of recording this with Bandicam so that it's just recording the actual window rather than a contained frame. So that's going to be different. So I just could be talking to myself right now. Who the hell knows? But I'm good company, so I really don't mind. But anyways, I guess take it away, future me again, ants, etc., and so forth. Go fuck yourself, future me. Alright, see you guys later. Don't trivialize my life, you bastard. You have it easy in the past. What with your typewriters and Tamagotchis, whatever the fuck they had back then, light brights. Anyways, I'll get this out of the way. One of the thing that I was actually going to say about armor design and combat within the context of making this sort of realistic and functional is that historically researchers have found that what we thought is how people fought back then, how modern people try to replicate modern like longsword fighting, is actually probably how they actually did it back then. Because most of the time, whenever you're fighting with, say, it doesn't matter what you're fighting with, just a weapon, a sword, mace, it doesn't matter. That most of the time, what you're going to do is go for the head, which sounds like it, that makes sense. It seems like something, but, well, of course you would. But, you don't, especially with armor, I mean, imagine, even, say, with non-armor, if you hit someone and just, get their arm or something, they can still stand back up. So obviously what you're going to do all the time is go for a killing blow. But there's a lot of instances where they find on people that have been buried that they know were killed during combat, that the injuries that they sustained, in some cases, were just like a glancing blow on one part of their body, followed immediately by a blow to the head, and in some cases, nothing but a blow to the head, which tells you that during combat, their opponents were always going straight for their skull. And if you look at like ancient documents and things like that that show how you should be fighting, then there's a lot of people doing the equivalent of a Dark Souls backstep, except, you know, a Dark Souls backstep is like you're jumping like 5 meters behind you. It's ridiculous. But like a real-life version of a backstep, you lean very far backwards because you're trying to evade a counter-strike blow to your face by mere inches. It's kind of that thing. But anyways, the whole point I was trying to make with that is that, you know, be rational about your designs. And the reason why that they made very small things like, you know, distinctions between design as far as asymmetry goes is because they were trying to make movement as fluid as possible. You would think that someone in a suit of armor is big and clunky and weighty and they can't really move. Actually, armor doesn't really weigh that much. It's, you know, it's obviously weighs quite a bit, but it's not like carrying around, you know, 100 pounds or something. It's, in most cases, armor was designed to be, you know, like 20 pounds up to about 40 pounds or things like that. And a weapon itself, like a longsword, you think, oh, longsword's probably like 10 pounds or something. No, a longsword is probably something in the range of about 2 to 4 pounds, something like that. So, not really bad at all. Not bad at all. Here I'm doing a little emblem thing. I've kind of skimmed over. I'll actually explain this as well. I'm using Powerdirector 13, which I recently purchased. I had been using 11, I think it was. This thing is buggy as shit right now because they just released it. So I'm being kind of forgiving about it. But right now, I'm not even sure if what I'm recording is going to sync up properly, because whenever I was playing back the first bit of post-com that I did, I noticed that the portion of the video that was not sped up, that was live, was being sped up within Powerdirector as though it was sped up like the other clips that I'm using, like what you're seeing now. So now I'm afraid that it's not going to export correctly, or I'm not recording correctly. Who the hell knows? My point being, if something fucks up, I blame them, not me. I'm cool. I'm the cool guy. Anyways, back to this. Here I'm just going through and doing my color zoning, which you heard explained to begin with, so this really shouldn't be much of a surprise. Here I am doing something I despise doing, and this is so fucking cheap the way that I'm doing it. Most people that actually do know how to do this are probably cringing right now. But I'm just doing this to make it as quick as possible, because this is probably not something that's going to show up that much anyway, so I really don't care too much about it. I just pulled up a random Google image search of chainmail, and I went back and overlaid little bitty pieces of it on top of one another, and then once selected out the areas where it is not going to be and just deleted it from the thing. I think you saw Kazarad, a prequel, coming online on Skype. Everyone be sure to mention him. Everyone message him and tell him what a great guy he is, and how he has leukemia. He doesn't have leukemia. Anyways, as far as I know, I don't know. That's a joke from a 4chan thread. Just ignore the fact that I'm talking about it all right now. Anyways, I'm just going through and doing this stupid chainmail bullshit. Oh god, it was such a chore. I think it took me like 30 minutes to get to this, to a point where it wasn't physically offending me to look at. Because again, it's, especially, I shouldn't have done this as my first step, especially, because this is probably going to have the most contrast of anything in the image. But because I haven't worked anything else up in the image, it is especially going to be confusing as far as how much emphasis I should be putting on everything. Another thing I'll mention with that texture is that really you should be doing very minor... It's something you should do in Photoshop if you're going to be doing that, because that will allow you to make more minor changes to where the texture is heading, how it's curving, so that it actually looks natural. You don't just plop it on top of the thing and then say, well, there's my texture. I mean, that's awful, just awful. And the second mistake I'm making here is that I'm doing the leather area second. And I don't know about you guys, I absolutely detest coloring in leather and shit like that. Because it doesn't shine particularly well, as you can see. It does not look natural. But at the same time, it doesn't really look that dark either. It's a mid-tone texture. It's a type of material that in real life does not really emit strong reflections and doesn't really handle shadows particularly well, if that makes any sense. So what I end up having to do is just go back over it with I went back over it with a minor brush setting to give it a little bit of texture, by the way. And I just keep working back over it with other layers of shading to try to make it look as natural as possible. Like right here, you can see that it's a little bit too dark. I realize this, I go back over it. And then I eventually decided, you know what? Right now, this does not look natural to me because it is the the first or second thing that I have done as far as shading goes. So, of course, it's not going to look natural. So I will come back to it later. So, first mistake, doing the most heavily textured thing first because I was just trying to get out of the way. Second mistake, going to my weakest possible skill, using leather is the second thing, which is also a problem as far as tonality goes. Just really stupid, amateurish mistakes that I'm making. Anyways. But onto the grass! Yay, grass! One of the fun things about doing that sort of thing... one of the fun things about orange is that you can make accent shadows in red. Or you can make accent shadows in, I guess sort of a burnt orange, or things like that. And it looks natural. It's pretty easy to work with. I really like oranges and yellows and reds as far as things like that go, because it's pretty easy to cheat and get things to look natural. Because the human eye is used to looking at things that are orange and yellow and stuff, because we have a yellow sun! Go outside, look up, stare at it for 15 minutes. Burn your retinas out. Then you'll realize I'm correct. Anyways, things like blue do not... I think I mentioned this before. Blues don't really work too well. Here I'm going back over the shadows, and I'm trying to create more accents that the armor is fluted, but not getting too heavy with it. Think ahead to where your lighting is going to be. And if your lighting... Like in this case, the lighting is obviously going to be coming from the left side. So, as you can see, I'm not doing much shading over on that side. I could just get really heavy with it and do like a bunch of detail shading and then say to myself, well, I'll just, later on I will just go back over it and it won't show up thanks to luminosity or something. But that doesn't really work. It kind of shows through all the layers, then you have to go back to the layers that you already did and start getting rid of things to make it look more natural. It's easier to just make lighter, simpler attempts at shading on different layers and just work back over to one side. That way, if anything doesn't look particularly natural, you can go to, say, shading 1, if that's your heaviest shading, and lower that down a little bit, or go to your detail shading layer, which like a shading 3 or whatever, and lower that down, and it works a lot better. It's a lot simpler to use. And I say all that, and probably none of what I just said made any sense whatsoever. So congratulations, me. You're the best commentator that there ever was. For God's sake. Anyways, but that is what I'm doing right now. I'm doing my sort of secondary and tertiary layers of shading. Nothing too complicated. I mean, this is not like high-level shit or anything. This is just stupid cartoony bullshit. But here, now I'm starting on my luminosity layer. I used to do overlay for my lighting layers in the past. But now I've kind of gone more towards a lower opacity luminosity. I think I'm starting in full 100 opacity right now. And it's much easier to start with 100 opacity and then just erase down what you don't want to be white. If that makes sense. You want your... Like the very edges of where your lighting is coming from, you want to obviously be as wide as possible to get as much contrast as you possibly can. But things that get further away from that, you want to erase down to make it look a bit more natural. And you can see now that this is looking a bit more fully realized as a render. But again, since this is sort of naturally cartoony to begin with, like this is not a full-on realism, portrait or anything like that. So I don't want it to get overly realistic with the shading, or else that will create problems in the future. And if anything there is that I know about, it's problems in the future, or the present. I don't know, I'm really confusing myself with this narrative that I'm creating here. But, working on my feather here. Feathers are fucking hard. Because it's one of those things where a feather is actually a combination of... I'll say it this way. The way that things evolved is hair and feathers are actually sort of the same thing. The difference is that feathers, if you look on a microscopic level, have very tiny little bitty hooks on them that cause them to stick together and create those feathery folds that you see. And that is sort of what enables things to fly, because they're, you know, linked together in these spread out folds that enables things, you know, it makes you able to glide through the air and shit like that. Why the hell did I just mention that? God, my brain. But... Oh, that's the reason why the feathers are so difficult to draw. Is because it's actually hair, in a way. It's tiny, itty-bitty little individual strands. And if you make a really realistic-looking feather, guess what? That conflicts with something that's supposed to look sort of cartoony. So that's the reason why I just sort of shed out a little bit of light on top of it and say, it's good enough. Plus, whenever I go back to it later and I start changing the line color, which I don't think I did in the prior video, but I do in this one, then it ends up looking a bit more natural. And for some reason, I didn't do my primary or even secondary or anything shading on the cloth here, which I end up doing. Since there's no real major folds and this is sort of just sitting on the outside, there's not going to be a lot of major like shifts in how the fabric is folding. So it's kind of hard to get some natural looking lighting going on this thing. Because it's much easier to create natural looking lighting if you have dramatic meeting points to work with, if that makes sense. Because again, that's what lines are, that's how you paint. It's meeting points of light and dark. It's the most basic rule of any sort of even any, you know, demi-realistic painting or drawing or anything. It's meeting points of light and dark. But with that cloth, since there's no real major folds anywhere, then I kind of just had to do a general, you know, here's some shadows, you know, just very loose ideas. Never really figured out exactly what the hell that is in the middle, his crotchal region. But, you know, since that's where the poop comes from, he gets brown shadows, I guess that's my... I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But this sort of fabric here is more... It's not very loose and flowing. I imagine it's very kind of rigid for a fabric. So I tried to make the shadows look that way. You can make different kinds of strokes. Make his little grass thing green. I did that because I felt like his overall design was kind of straying away from being Solaire-like. So I ended up deciding, you know what, we'll just try to include as many Solaire moves as possible. That way, there's, you know, more of him in the finals. Because, especially with that helmet, this is sort of a Ostrava face. There's more Ostrava in it just because of that helmet. Because even though it's not a literal face, it's the thing that you're drawn the most to in the design. Whenever you're making these sort of fusion designs, that's probably the most important thing, is to get the face meshed up as much as possible, which I kind of did not succeed completely at, but I'm still happy with it. This is something I wanted to mention. I'm going over my line layer and selecting all the areas like the metal, like all the lines where all the metal is, and I'm changing them to a light blue. I changed all the grass sort of lines to a like a green, and all the cloth to sort of a brown. And what's that? That's going to make everything look a little bit more natural. Anyways, this is the last little thing, doing a little tonality layer. Again, how I do that, I select that. I go to the folder and I select all the area that is not there, which is pretty easy since it's all contained in a folder. And then I invert my selection, do a multiply layer, paint everything inside that, and then lower the opacity down, or just raise the natural brightness of that color is almost up to a pure white, and that evens out all the tones of the colors of the image. Makes it look a little bit more natural. And here I am trying to do the same thing that I did in the prior videos, to make everything unified, doing that sort of everything white off to the left side and shadow and whatnot over to the right side. And here I'm doing my little poses that I decided to do with this series. This, yeah, that's not a good looking leg, buddy. I forgot what I was originally trying to do, but eventually I decided, you know what? This would look pretty good as a little bonfire image. So I ended up rolling with that, because I remembered Solaire sitting in the bonfire room of, oh, I can't think of it. Oh my gosh. At Orlando. And I thought, I always liked that. That's one of his little definitive poses. Him just sitting there, talking about various sexual attractions you may or may not have, but probably did. And this one is, and the little step one was kind of inspired more by Ostrava's final scene. I'll probably talk more about the lore of each character in the penultimate version, the very, very final thing. But he ends up discovering what has happened to his father, and he ends his sort of storyline by sitting on the stairs, telling you, go take out my dad, because he is now a demon, and my foolhardy attempt to, just, he's kind of realized what a piece of shit that he really is, and that, everything is falling apart, he has nothing left in the world. And he just kills himself on the steps. So that's kind of what I was thinking about. This last one, this stupid little lightning thing, oh god, that took forever. Because I kept getting the pose right. Getting poses right is very difficult. Finishing things off, I really like the idea of the lightning, plus the smoke flowing in all directions. Thought that was pretty fucking cool. Okay, but that's pretty much it. Doing some little final, change the color of the line work to brown, makes it a little bit more natural. But I end up with this final design, as you can see here. I changed the background color, that's pretty much the only thing I really did. This one, as a render, looks a little bit better than the prior one. I attribute a lot of that to the lighting. The lighting armor looks a lot better than lighting something like cloth. Which the last one, of course, was mainly cloth, this was mainly armor. And plus I did the extra step of coloring up the lines of the image itself, and as you can tell, that went a long way. Another thing that you can do with that is, rather than doing what I did and lasso out all the areas and go back over with preserved opacity and color all those lines in, rather than doing that, you can instead just set your line layer to multiply and then lower the opacity down a little bit, and if you have color under it, it'll blend a little bit in to make it look a little bit more natural. Probably the easiest thing to do is to, before you even get started, have a whole line work, that way you can select things easier, but also have a quote-unquote real line work section, which is contained in folders, that has all the individual segments all partitioned off into their individual line sets. That way you can go through and very quickly change the color to whatever you want. That would be the easiest thing to do, and that's what a smart person would do, but I am not that smart, apparently. And also I am fairly lazy, apparently. But anyways, I really like this design, I think, for the most part. You may end up disliking it more than the prior video, which I did not really care too much for. But, once again, I think one hand is very slightly bigger than the other one. Maybe. They're kind of the same size. I shouldn't tell you guys the various flaws, because then you start to see them. And then you point them out and say, yes, obviously this isn't right. What were you thinking? And I have to say in the comments, I don't know. I just don't know. But it looks pretty good. It should combine pretty well with future fusions. Whenever I start combining all the fusions of the fusions, then the elements on this one should combine pretty damn well with the other ones. But that is it for the preliminary ones, except for who do I love? Lucatil and Ostrava. That's going to be the very final one. So that will be the next video in this series, and then after that, I will what will I do? Combine the... What do I do in these fucking things? Will I combine the combinations into their own thing? No, I'll just combine all three at the same time, because that wouldn't make any sense. What am I talking about? Anyways, I will combine all three after that, and that will be the penultimate video, in the fourth and final installment of the video. But anyways, I will see you guys then. I need to get back on the war front, because the ants have broken through the last of our defensive barriers, and they have support from the wasps, but I think that we can make a deal with the mantids. You never know. But I'll see you guys then.